There are mornings when you wake up and something feels different. Not wrong exactly, not broken, just quieter than it used to be. The house holds a kind of stillness that was not there before, and somewhere between opening your eyes and placing your feet on the floor, a feeling arrives. Soft, persistent, unnamed. You have done so much. You have carried so much. And yet, underneath all of that doing and carrying, there is a question that has never quite found its answer. Why does a piece still feel like something just beyond reach? Perhaps you have noticed it in small ways. The way a photograph from years ago can stop you completely, holding you inside a moment that no longer exists. The way certain nights feel heavier than others, not because anything has gone wrong, but because the mind begins its quiet inventory of everything that has changed, everything that has passed, everything that will never return exactly as it was. You were not taught how to do this part. Nobody sat you down and explained what happens after the rushing stops, after the roles fall away, after the life you spent decades building becomes something you look at from a new and unfamiliar distance. You were taught to be strong. You were taught to provide, to endure, to keep going. But you were never quite taught how to simply be, without justification, without performance, without proof. This is not a failure. It is, in truth, the most human of conditions. And if you are feeling it now, in this quieter chapter of your life, it means something important. You are finally still enough to hear it. The noise has softened, the urgency has thinned, and beneath all of it, something patient and ancient is waiting for you to turn toward it. If these words are finding you at a moment when your heart is ready for something deeper, consider staying close to this space. What follows is not advice. It is a quiet conversation between your soul and the wisdom that has always lived inside you. Subscribe if you feel called to, so that this kind of reflection can continue to find you when you need it most. There is a teaching that appears again and again in Buddhist wisdom, and it is so simple that the mind almost refuses to believe it could be enough. Suffering, it says, does not come from what happens to us. It comes from our resistance to what happens. It comes from the tightening, the gripping, the insistence that life should have gone differently, should be going differently now, should be arranged according to a plan that the universe has never once agreed to follow. And when we understand this, not just intellectually, but in the body, in the breath, in the slow relaxing of muscles we didn't know we had clenched, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but genuinely, like a window opening in a room that had been sealed for a very long time. This is the invitation that aging carries within it, quietly, beneath all the changes you did not ask for and may not have welcomed. It is an invitation to stop fighting the river and learn, perhaps, for the first time, to float, not to give up, not to surrender to despair, but to release the exhausting grip on what was, what should have been, and what you fear is coming, and to discover that your hands, finally open, are capable of holding something far more real. There is something that happens in the body when a person has spent decades believing that their worth must be earned. You can feel it as a kind of permanent readiness, a low hum of alertness, as if the moment you stop being useful, the ground beneath you might disappear. Many people carry this their entire lives without ever naming it. They move from one role to the next, one responsibility to the next, and the brief pauses in between feel less like rest and more like falling. Am I still needed? Am I still enough? These questions do not announce themselves loudly. They settle quietly into the posture of a person who has forgotten how to put down what they are carrying. Buddhist wisdom offers something to this exhaustion that is both radical and extraordinarily gentle. It says that your worth has never been a question of output, that the dignity of a human life does not accumulate through achievement or diminish through stillness. Think of a candle placed in a dark room. It does not burn harder to prove it deserves to give light. It simply burns, and in its burning, warmth happens. You are not so different from that candle. The warmth you have offered throughout your life, the patience, the sacrifice, the quiet endurance, was never something you earned the right to give. It was already, your nature. Letting go of the need to prove your worth does not mean becoming passive. It means discovering what was always true, that your presence, unadorned and unperforming, is already enough. Tomorrow morning, before you measure the day by what you accomplished in it, try sitting for 5 minutes without an agenda. Not meditating perfectly, not achieving stillness, just sitting as yourself without explanation. Notice what that feels like in your chest. That feeling, that quiet, unfamiliar spaciousness, is where peace begins. The roles we play across a lifetime are necessary and beautiful, and they shape us in ways we are still discovering. But there comes a time when a coat that once fit perfectly begins to feel heavy. The caretaker, the provider, the one everyone leans on, these identities serve something real, and honoring them is right. What is not right, and what causes a quiet, persistent grief, is continuing to wear that coat long after the season has changed. Buddhism does not ask you to forget who you were. It asks you to recognize that clinging to a version of yourself that the present moment no longer requires is its own kind of suffering. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to become simpler, quieter, more interior. The self that remains when the roles fall away is not smaller than the self who carried them. It is, in many ways, freer. It can connect without obligation, love without the need to manage, be present without performing. Give yourself permission this week to lay down one role that no longer fits, not with bitterness, with gratitude for what it gave you, and with the genuine curiosity of someone who wants to know what comes next. There is a habit of mind that becomes louder in the quieter years, and it is worth naming clearly because it can consume entire afternoons, entire seasons, entire chapters of life that deserve to be lived. It is the habit of returning to old conversations, turning them over, looking for the place where things went wrong, returning to decisions made decades ago and examining them from every angle, as if understanding them better now could somehow change what they brought. Buddhism teaches something important here. The past is not a place. It is a construction of the present mind. Each time we enter it, we strengthen its hold on us. Each time we replay what cannot be changed, we borrow pain from something that no longer exists and spend it in the only moment we actually have, this one. This does not mean the past is irrelevant, or that grief has no place, or that old wounds should be denied. It means that there is a difference between reflection and attachment. Reflection teaches and releases. Attachment replays and holds. Think of the past as a river you once crossed. It carried you here. It shaped you. But you are standing on a different shore now, and staring back across the water will not move you forward. The practice is not to force yourself to stop remembering. It is to notice with patience when remembering has become reliving, and to gently return to the only shore where life is actually happening. Of all the things the aging body teaches, one of the most surprising is this: fear of what others think does not automatically dissolve with age. For many people, it intensifies, sharpened by new vulnerabilities, by the experience of being overlooked, by the quiet terror of becoming invisible in a culture that celebrates the young and the fast and the visibly productive. Buddhism reminds us that other people's opinions are among the least stable things in existence. They shift with mood, with circumstance, with misunderstanding. Building your sense of self on them is like building a house on water. The structure may look solid from a distance, but every wave threatens it. The invitation here is not to stop caring about others, but to stop requiring their approval as the price of your own peace. As the years pass, you are offered something rare, the chance to live more honestly, to speak less carefully, to move more gently, to stop editing yourself for an audience that, more often than not, is far too preoccupied with its own fears to be watching you as closely as you imagine. Authenticity is not a reward for old age, it is a practice, but the later years make it more available if you are willing to receive it. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from a lifetime of being the strong one. You know this exhaustion. It does not live in the muscles exactly, though the muscles know it too. It lives somewhere deeper, in the habit of minimizing your own pain because others have it worse, in the reflexive reassurance you offer when people worry about you, in the way you have learned to carry difficulty quietly without complaint, without asking for what you actually need. Buddhist wisdom draws a distinction between strength and rigidity. It tells a story about trees in a storm. The rigid tree, the one that will not bend, is the one that breaks. The tree that survives is the one that moves with the wind, not because it is weak, but because it is wise enough to yield without losing its roots. True strength in this sense is not the refusal to feel. It is the willingness to feel fully and continue anyway. Letting go of the illusion that you must always endure does not mean collapsing. It means allowing yourself to be human, to say without shame that you are tired, that some days are heavier than others, that you do not have all the answers and no longer need to. The cup that is always full cannot receive anything new. When you allow space for vulnerability, something enters that strength alone could never invite: genuine connection, genuine rest, genuine peace. If this reflection is landing somewhere real in you, know that there is more where this came from. Subscribe and stay close, because the conversation we are having here about aging, about releasing, about finding the peace that was always inside you, deserves to continue. The next teaching is already waiting. There is a belief that settles into the bones quietly, without announcement, and it may be one of the heaviest things a person can carry. It is the belief that the best is behind you. That joy belongs to memory. That excitement is something you once had access to, and have since lost the key to. You may recognize it in small phrases that arise unbidden. Those were the days. I had my time. What's the point now? Buddhism holds something against this belief that is both direct and surprisingly tender. It says that clinging to the past, even to beautiful memories, even to a version of yourself you genuinely loved, is its own form of suffering. Not because the past was wrong, but because it no longer exists, and living inside it means missing the life that is actually present. Joy changes shape as we age. This is simply true, and pretending otherwise helps no one. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, less reliant on novelty and stimulation, but it does not become less real. A warm cup of tea held between both hands. Sunlight arriving at a particular angle through a window you have looked through for years. A conversation without urgency, with someone who genuinely knows you. These are not consolation prizes for a life that has peaked. They are the deepest joys available to a human being, and they require exactly the kind of presence that only comes with time. Stop measuring today against a yesterday that no longer exists, and something begins to open. Curiosity returns. Wonder, which never actually left, simply becomes available again. you are still here, still sensing, still capable of being moved. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Of all the fears that accompany the later years of life, perhaps none is more quietly devastating than the fear of being alone. Not just the circumstantial aloneness that comes as social circles naturally shift, but the deeper fear of what happens when there is no noise, no role, no distraction standing between you and yourself. Many people fill this space with television, with unnecessary commitments, with any sound that will prevent the silence from settling. Buddhism teaches that this silence is not emptiness, it is a doorway. The Buddha spent long periods in solitude, not as an act of withdrawal, but as an act of intimacy with life itself, with the awareness that underlies every experience, with the self that exists beneath all the performing and all the proving. Fear of being alone often conceals a deeper question. What will I feel when there is nothing left to distract me from feeling it? The answer, when you are willing to stay and find out, is almost always less terrifying than the fear suggested. The mind settles, the breath deepens. Something that can only be described as companionship arises, not from another person, but from your own presence, finally met without condition. You are not empty when you are alone. You have never been empty. You are accompanied, always, by the awareness that breathes you, that has carried you through every season of your life, and that does not require anyone else's presence to be complete. And then there is the fear that speaks last and speaks quietly and yet shapes everything it touches. The fear of death, and underneath it, the fear of not understanding, of leaving this life without having fully grasped what it was, without having resolved every question, without having reached some final certainty about what comes next. Buddhism does not ask you to pretend this fear is not there. It asks you to look at it honestly without turning away, and to discover that what the fear is actually attached to is not death itself, but the stories around it. The story that something solid and permanent will be taken. The story that you must figure life out completely before you are allowed to rest. The story that peace is a reward for understanding, and since understanding remains incomplete, peace must wait, but the horizon always moves. Trying to reach complete understanding before allowing yourself peace is like walking toward a horizon line. The closer you get, the further it recedes. There is a Zen saying that not knowing is most intimate. It means that when we stop demanding certainty as the price of presence, we come into deeper contact with reality than any amount of understanding could provide. Each breath you take, you do not control. It arrives, sustains you, and leaves on its own. And yet, it has been doing this your entire life, faithfully without your management. Life, in this sense, has always been holding you. Accepting impermanence does not diminish the preciousness of what you have lived. It illuminates it. When you know a thing is temporary, you stop trying to possess it and begin finally to experience it. The fear of death, gently released, does not leave emptiness in its place. It leaves presence, it leaves gratitude, it leaves the quiet, luminous understanding that to have been here at all, to have loved, to have been moved, to have witnessed this world in your own unrepeatable way is not something that required completion to be meaningful. It was always already enough. You do not need to master any of this. These are not instructions, they are invitations, and invitations can be returned to as many times as you need in whatever order feels right, at whatever pace your life allows. The peace you are looking for is not somewhere ahead of you, waiting to be earned through sufficient understanding or sufficient letting go. It is here, beneath the noise, beneath the habits, beneath the stories you have been carrying so long you forgot they were stories. It has been here all along, patient and unhurried, like deep water beneath the surface of a lake. What changes is not the water. What changes is your willingness to be still enough to feel it. May your shoulders soften today. May your breath arrive a little more easily. May you find in the smallest ordinary moments of this life the warmth that has always been your nature. And may you know with quiet certainty that you were never as far from peace as the fear suggested. If this reflection touched something real in you, stay close, subscribe, and let this conversation continue to find you gently whenever you need it most.